All right, hi everyone. I'm CBS 19 Chief Meteorologist Brett Anthony here live on our CBS 19 streaming channel, on our YouTube channel, and on our Facebook page. We are here to talk about all things hurricane for the 2025 season, and we are joined by National Weather Service meteorologist Ryan Knapp from the Shreveport office. Good afternoon, Ryan.
Yeah, good afternoon. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for doing this. I know you guys are busy with all the thunderstorms that we've had moving through East Texas here and western Louisiana in the last few days. But I really appreciate you guys reaching out and giving us this opportunity to talk about all things hurricane.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, the hurricane season just started on June 1st, and we want to do as much outreach as possible to get our community members in East Texas, Northwest Louisiana, Southwest Arkansas, and Oklahoma ready for the upcoming hurricane season.
All right, with that said, let's talk about NOAA's official hurricane outlook for the 2025 season. I do have some numbers behind me. The May forecast had 13 to 19 storms. We had 6 to 10 hurricanes and 3 to 5 major hurricanes. How does that line up historically?
Yeah, so I mean, you have the number, at least for the averages, it's around 14 named storms, 7 of those being hurricanes, and 3 of those being major hurricanes. That's kind of the climatological average. So if you look at the numbers, which I think are kind of up on the screen right here, you notice that they're not too far off from what that climatological average is. The higher side of the bounds, that 19, 10, and 5, obviously is, being above average. And the forecast as a whole kind of leans a little bit towards that above average, but not necessarily close to the numbers that we saw last year. And there's a few factors that kind of go into that as we move through, this upcoming hurricane season. Obviously, a lot of the preseason forecasts are calling for, us moving out of La Nina and more towards a little bit towards a neutral phase. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that because everyone this time of year always talks about whether we're in El Nino or La Nina and that impact on the upcoming hurricane season.
Okay, before we get into that, let's talk about a recap of the 2024 season. You kind of hinted at it. It was a very busy season, especially once we got past the climatological peak of September.
Yeah, so we finished around 18 named storms, 11 of those being hurricanes, and then 5 majors last year. So we were above average in every one of those categories. And if you remember, back in May, a lot of the preseason forecast numbers were rather historic, especially with some, agency and even academia forecasts showing some of their highest forecasts that they've ever put out, their preseason forecasts. And which is very interesting considering last season was one of our lowest or slowest starts on record since 2014. So, we had that kind of slower start, but then Beryl showed up, and I think Beryl kind of set off a lot of alarms given the fact that it became our earliest Cat 5 on record across the Atlantic Basin, and then obviously had an impact here locally.
And that was in, I believe, July 8th, as I recall, when Beryl finally made it here into East Texas and parts of western Louisiana. Let's talk about Beryl. You mentioned it was a Category 5 storm when it was still over the Gulf. Once it got here into East Texas, it was a busy day for you at the National Weather Service office in Shreveport and all of the media partners and other partners around East Texas. Give us a recap of what Beryl did here across our region.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, I mean, Beryl was one of the earliest Cat 5s on record, and that was, while it was still part of the, main development region across the Central Atlantic, moving into the Caribbean. Once it got towards the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, there was a lot of uncertainty of how Beryl would look as it moved off the northern tip of the Yucatan, given the fact that it was entering, a little bit more sheer in that part of the basin, along with the friction from the surface as it moved over that, more terrain across parts of Mexico. So once it actually reemerged into the southern Gulf, there was a lot of uncertainty of how strong it would be, given that the forecast was still calling for it to make a landfall somewhere across the South Texas coast. Ultimately made a landfall as a Category 1 in Matagorda, Texas, before moving off to the north and northeast, making its way into East Texas, ultimately becoming a tropical storm rather quickly, and then an depression by the time it actually entered into our warning area. But it was a busy day, as you mentioned. I mean, I got to the office about 6:30, 7 o'clock that morning, and didn't leave till around almost 11 o'clock midnight that night, given the fact that we started issuing tornado warnings for our area, given the fact that, one thing a lot of people forget about is that the hazards don't stop at the coast. They continue well inland. As we saw with the tornado warnings, we issued 67 tornado warnings over the course of about 8 hours, with 43 of those actually being confirmed tornadoes.
Was that a record for the office?
In one day, definitely. Yeah, we definitely set a record here locally for our area. So it was a busy day, nonetheless. Every kind of station we have in our office was filled with a meteorologist. In fact, some of those stations were actually doubled up with 2 minutes as we were trying to communicate the hazards of this tornado outbreak we had across our area, and then obviously the other hazards that come with landfalling hurricanes for inland communities with flooding, rainfall, and damaging winds.
You know, we hear a lot about the flooding, rainfall, the damaging winds from a landfalling hurricane. But when it becomes a tropical depression, and I'll have a lot of folks out in the community ask me, how can it spin up a tornado if it's a tropical depression? Hasn't it weakened? So I'll put the question to you, how can it spin up tornadoes when it's weakened that much?
Well, you got to think, even though the storm is weakened, you're still getting that cyclonic motion of the wind. So that allows for that curvature of the low level winds, especially as you go higher up into the atmosphere, to allow for that kind of tornado environment to occur. There's a lot of studies out there, actually, in the last probably 5 to 10 years, talking about where the tornado events actually occur when it comes to landfalling tropical cyclones. And they're finding that somewhere around maybe close to 50 to 100 miles away from the center. That's kind of the average of where some of these tornado events are occurring. So it's still a new study. It's still some new science coming out, but something that's getting a lot of a focus because as we even looked at last year in our area, that tornado event that happened, I think it was a perfect storm in the sense that, we were kind of at the peak of daytime heating, so to speak, when we saw the tornado event occurring when Beryl was closest to us. But then you can even look at some of the landfalling hurricanes across portions of Florida last year with Helene, Milton, and Dahlia producing tornado events across the peninsula there in Florida as well. So it's definitely gaining a lot of attention. And I think that actually turns into a good conversation about how there's some changes for this upcoming year with the cone. Last year, the Hurricane Center was, showing more of an experimental cone by showing those inland watches and warnings. That's something different that they haven't done in recent years, where they only really showed the coastal warnings, and then you would receive those products from your local National Weather Service. Now those inland watches and warnings are on the cone, and I think it's driving the messaging about the fact that hazards extend far beyond just the coastlines and far beyond the center of these storms.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up with Beryl, especially here. I mean, there's so many of those tornadoes where, as you mentioned, quick spin ups. They didn't last very long, but boy, they spun up in a flash, which was a challenge for you guys issuing the tornado warnings. But wow, I mean, what a job, and how many that we had. Let's talk about the 2025 season and how it may be different. You kind of touched on it a little bit. We're coming out of El Nino and going more into a neutral, possibly to La Nina.
Yeah, so we were in La Nina last year, and we're actually transitioning back to that kind of neutral phase for this upcoming year. And that's what makes the forecast a little bit more on the tricky side for this upcoming season, is because there's a lot of different factors that go into neutral side of the forecast. There's the warm phase of ENSO neutral, and then there's the cool phase of ENSO neutral. And they can oftentimes show varying degrees of either El Nino-like conditions or La Nina. Some of the forecasts are leaning more towards that cool side of the ENSO neutral phase. So you could get some La Nina-like tendencies, so the production and wind shear across the Western Caribbean and the Gulf, while also still seeing the warm sea surface temperatures. But if we were to end up a little bit more on that warm side of the neutral phase, it's possible you could see some more El Nino-like conditions. And there's still a lot of uncertainty with some of the climate models for where we look at when it comes to that ENSO neutral. So it'll be interesting to see as we move through the season. One thing to really keep in mind too is the fact that, and we were just looking at this today here in the office, that main development region, so where the Antilles kind of stretch all the way to the western coast of Africa, is running a little bit cooler this year compared to where it ran last year. And that's a combination of some stronger trade winds across the Atlantic, as well as some Saharan dust.
With that in mind, and I've seen this recently here, we've seen a lot of what we'll call social meteorologists or meteorologists who put out these 16 to 18 day forecasts. For instance, the Global Forecast System model, the GFS, having a system in the Gulf next week. What do we want to remind folks about when we see things on social media when it comes to hurricane season?
I think one thing, and you see it also in the wintertime, but especially during hurricane season, you just got to be careful about where you get your information from. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're getting your information from a credible source, whether it be your local TV stations, your local National Weather Service. Obviously, the National Hurricane Center is the go-to source for anything tropical across the lower 48. So you just want to make sure you're getting information from a credible source. If there's something out there, or that's something that's potentially going to be out there, they'll let you know. That's ultimately the best piece of advice to really give. And just kind of like I said, keep in mind that making sure that the source that you're getting your information from is a credible one, especially as we move through hurricane season, where there's a lot of hype that goes on to social media, with different model runs going out to 200 plus hours, or going out 10 to 15 days. So it's just something to keep in mind here as we move to the next few months.
It causes a lot of panic for travelers who may be going on a cruise, that's for sure. Let's talk about the basic information regarding how hurricanes develop and are forecast, tracked, and monitored.
Yeah, so basically, they start as a cluster of showers and thunderstorms, and that can be anywhere across, whether that be in the Caribbean, whether that be in the Gulf, whether that be in the Atlantic. And over time, they're able to consolidate and become these large spinning clusters of thunderstorms. Ultimately, that's kind of the basic way to put it. And so, one thing we always talk about, especially in this part of the country, when we talk about severe thunderstorms or severe weather, we often say, oh, well, there's a strong amount of wind shear in the atmosphere. These storms, have the potential to be, really strong. That's quite the opposite when we talk about hurricanes. Wind shear can actually allow for, a rather strong hurricane to become a tropical storm in 12 to 24 hours. We've seen that before. So wind shear, when it comes to hurricanes, is not good for hurricanes to, form or survive. But obviously, they also need warm sea surface temperatures, and that's something we see as we move through the summertime months. The heating of the sea surface temperatures, and that's why we even touched on the fact that parts of the Central Atlantic are maybe not nearly as warm as they were last year, but they're still sustainable for tropical cyclone development. When it comes to tracking them, obviously we don't have any sort of storm spawners or any source of human detection out in the Central Atlantic. So there's a couple ways that we are able to kind of track these storms. A lot of it through satellite. We also use satellite intensity estimates to ultimately determine how strong those storms are, until we can get some sort of observation. And that typically comes in the form of the NOAA and Air Force Hurricane Hunter missions that go into those storms and they then fly over those storms. And that data then goes into the models that we use to make our forecast. And it's typical that the model runs that have that Hurricane Hunter data are, we have a little bit more confidence in those model runs compared to those that maybe don't have that information.
All right, we touched on this briefly, but let's double back on this. What are the changes and updates to the forecast products from the National Hurricane Center? And it includes changes to the forecast cone.
Yeah, the big one's definitely the cone, and I think it benefits, not only your, DMA, but also our CWA for forecasting this year, considering that, we're not a coastal forecast office. Your DMA is not a coastal DMA. So this is directed towards inland communities. And that's showing those inland watches and warnings to the cone to really showcase the fact that those hazards extend far beyond the center and far beyond the coast. One thing we'll see this year, and a lot of people are going to ask, well, how does the cone get smaller? The cone is actually shrinking in size due to a decrease in the track error by 3 to 5% this year. And every year, you can even go back to, say, the 2004 cone, you'll see just the dramatic difference in the size of the cone over the course of the last 20 years. And that's because of the skill of the forecast has improved so much. So as that cone shrinks, obviously the width of the cone is only showcasing where the center of circulation of that storm could possibly move on either side. But those hazards extend far beyond the center. So one of the big changes, like I said, for this season is the inclusion of the inland watches and warnings, which help spread the message for those hazards that can extend far beyond the center of that storm.
And one of those hazards, of course, is flash flooding. I mean, tornadoes gets all the attention, but sometimes there is just this inundation of rainfall and flash flooding. What do folks have to remember about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, turn around, don't drown. That's kind of our main message when it comes to flooding, rainfall, flooded roads. And I mean, really a good example of how a storm can be far removed from a community is you just got to look at Helene last year and all the rainfall across the Carolinas. Helene had not even made rainfall. Or had made landfall, and influence from Helene had allowed for quite a dramatic rain and flooding event to occur across the Carolinas before the rain associated with the storm even got to the Carolinas. So I think the big message is, as we move through hurricane season, in the event that we are, in the threat of a landfalling storm, just remembering that it's not just a tornado threat, it's not just a wind threat, but also the flooding rainfall threat. And when those storms are, impacting your communities, it's hard for first responders to get out there. They may not even be able to get out there and help you. So it's good to just kind of stay inside, especially if we are going to have flooding. Water is traditionally, one of the major killers when it comes to landfalling hurricanes. Typically, that's talking about more of the storm surge side of things, but there are also fatalities from freshwater flooding as well.
I think it's a good reminder, though, because we do have folks from a 4-state region that might travel to one of the coastal areas that are close to us. So I think that's a good reminder about storm surge and the inland effects from the hurricane. Let's talk about hurricane preparedness safety tips for local residents here in East Texas, Western Louisiana, southeastern Oklahoma, and northwest or southwest Arkansas.
Well, what's great is the fact that there's so many resources out online that have step-by-step instructions on how to get a preparedness kit ready, whether this is your first hurricane season or your 30th hurricane season. It's always good to be prepared now. And it's never too early to be prepared, especially with the fact that, you don't want to all of a sudden get your preparation together, the couple days or the week before a storm is to impact. You want to make sure that you have it ready to go earlier rather than later. And it's even easier to get that supplies before a storm is impacting. We've both seen it. A storm is, bearing down on a community, and everyone's going out to get water. They're going out to grab non-perishables, batteries, flashlights, and before you know it, that stuff runs out pretty quickly. So when we talk about preparedness, it's always good to have at least a gallon of water per person for an extended period of time. Typically, we want to prepare for 5 to 7 days, possibly not having any power. One thing that is often, forgot about is the fact that if you have no power, you're not going to be able to use your credit cards. You want to make sure you get money out ahead of time, from an ATM, but also, filling up your car, making sure you have a full tank in the event that you are to evacuate, personal documents, keeping them in a sealed bag to make sure that, if you are moving around a lot, you still have those personal documents with you. And then another thing is medications, making sure you're prepared with your medications to, potentially go days without having power or the ability to get that medication.
I think we really learned a lot from Beryl last year, and we've had other storms impact East Texas, so we're not immune to hurricane impacts. Before we go, let's talk about the upcoming, say, week to 10 days. We're getting a little bit deeper into June, but boy, it just feels like we're set up for one of those situations where it's either nighttime thunderstorm complexes or a stalled boundary and showers and thunderstorms firing along the boundary. What's it looking like the next week to 10 days?
Yeah, we are outlooked for strong and severe storms across portions of the area through the next 2 to 3 days. So that is something we are watching. As you talked about those nighttime thunderstorms, we start to get into that northwest flow pattern where the models have a little bit of a harder time picking up on those stronger thunderstorm complexes that move through the area. So, there is some thunderstorm threat as we move through the next 2 days, being tomorrow and then into Saturday. So we are outlooked for severe weather for both of those days. We'll make sure to have updated forecast information on our social media. So more rain is returning to the area, but one thing to also talk about is the fact that it was 10:30 this morning and our ASOS from the Shreveport Regional Airport was already, showing 88 degrees. So the heat is returning on top of that. It's definitely getting warmer. It won't be long before we get closer to those 100-degree days. I would rather those not show up anytime soon, of course, but it's definitely getting warmer, and that just allows for more instability through the afternoons, especially for those nighttime thunderstorms to really thrive off of as we contain, some of that heat through the afternoon period.
We will hope that it is as tame as it can be while we still get some beneficial rainfall.
Absolutely, yeah.
Ryan Knapp, thank you for joining us this afternoon and lending your expertise to hurricane season and the upcoming forecast over the next 2 to 5, 7 days. We really appreciate your time.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great to be here.
Thank you, Ryan. Have a great day.